Hey, I'm Emma. Picture this. My father, the great Richard Coleman, founder of Quantum Labs, stared me down in his corner office and said, word for word, "Women don't belong in tech, Emma. You're wasting your time." I was 25, clutching a letter from Stanford's AI program, my ticket to something bigger. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he handed our family's legacy, a multimillion-dollar tech empire, to my brother Ethan, who'd barely coded a line in his life. Me? I was the afterthought, the one who didn't belong. His words didn't just sting, they burned, like a brand I'd carry forever. But here's the kicker. He thought I'd stay quiet, fade into the background. He had no idea I was already planning to rewrite his rules. That moment wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a wake-up call. Growing up in San Francisco, I'd spent years in the shadow of Quantum Labs' glass towers, fixing bugs and crunching data, while Ethan got the spotlight, the handshakes, the future. My father's voice echoed in every boardroom. Ethan's the visionary. Emma's just helpful. Helpful. Like I was some intern fetching coffee, not the one who'd built half their algorithms from scratch. But I kept my head down, thinking one day they'd see me. Spoiler, they didn't. Not until I made them. So what do you do when the man who's supposed to lift you up tears you down? When your own family bets against you? You don't cry. You don't beg. You get strategic. Stick with me to see how I turn their doubt into my power. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? I want to know who's with me on this journey because trust me, it's one hell of a ride. That day in my father's office when he told me women don't belong in tech, I walked out with my fists clenched, his words looping in my head like a bad song. But I didn't let them break me. I headed back to Quantum Labs, the heart of San Francisco's tech scene, where glass walls and neon lights screamed innovation. But for me, it was a battlefield. Quantum Labs wasn't just a company. It was my father's kingdom, a 30-story tower where my brother Ethan strutted like a prince, while I was stuck in the trenches. My desk, tucked in a corner by the coffee machine, was piled with debug logs and event schedules, tasks Ethan wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. He got boardroom applause. I got carpal tunnel from typing. Every morning, I'd swipe my badge at 7 sharp, weaving through analysts in press suits, their eyes sliding past me like I was invisible. Ethan, meanwhile, was the golden boy, always in a tailored blazer, pitching half-baked ideas my father called visionary. I'd spent years at Quantum Labs not as an heiress, but as the one who kept the servers humming. I'd written code that saved the company millions, but my name never made it to the company newsletter. Ethan's did every quarter like clockwork. Still, I had something burning inside me. A letter from Stanford's AI program, tucked in my bag like a secret weapon. It was my golden ticket, a fully funded spot to study artificial intelligence, the kind of thing that could have put my name on the map. I'd earned it through late nights and grit, but I hadn't told anyone, not even my mother, Laura. I kept waiting for the right moment, some rare day when my father might look at me and see more than just helpful. I imagined showing him the letter, pictured his face softening, maybe even a nod of pride. Foolish, I know, but hope's a stubborn thing. Quantum Labs was buzzing that week, prepping for a big product launch. I was tasked with everything from checking slide decks to making sure the catered sushi didn't spoil. Ethan, of course, was rehearsing his keynote, practicing his grin in the break room mirror. I caught him once adjusting his tie and he smirked. "You're good at the small stuff, sis. Keep it up." Small stuff. Like the algorithm I debugged that made his keynote possible. I bit my tongue, but my mind was racing. At home, in my tiny Mission District apartment, I'd stare at the city skyline, the Bay Bridge glowing in the distance. San Francisco was supposed to be the land of dreamers, but for me, it felt like a cage. My mother's voice echoed from childhood. "Support your brother, Emma. He's the future." She'd say it softly, her hands folding napkins at our Pacific Heights dining table, as if it was just fact, not a blade. I loved her, but her silence cut deeper than my father's scorn. That night, I pulled the Stanford letter from my bag, tracing the seal with my thumb. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof I belonged. I decided then, I'd show it to my father at the launch meeting in front of the whole team. Maybe then he'd see me. Maybe then I'd stop being invisible. Want to know what happened when I tried? Stick around, it's not what you think. Drop a comment. Have you ever fought to be seen? I'm reading every one. The night before Quantum Labs' big product launch, I barely slept. My tiny Mission District apartment felt smaller, the Bay Bridge lights flickering like a taunt through my window. I clutched the Stanford AI program letter, its crisp edges worn from my nervous grip. I'd decided to show it to my father, Richard, at the launch meeting, picturing a moment where he'd finally see me, not as helpful, but as someone who belonged. Hope's a stubborn thing, but it's no match for reality. The morning of the launch, Quantum Lab's 30-story tower buzzed with energy. Caterers wheeled in trays of artisanal pastries, and tech journalists in sleek blazers swarmed the lobby. I was everywhere, checking projectors, syncing slide decks, even unclogging a coffee machine, while Ethan, my brother, lounged in the green room practicing his keynote. He caught my eye through the glass and flashed that smug grin like he owned the place. I forced a smile, my stomach churning, and tucked the Stanford letter into my blazer pocket. This was it. The meeting room was packed, 50+ people. Executives, investors, engineers, crammed around a polished oak table. My father stood at the head, his voice booming as he introduced Ethan's visionary keynote. I waited, heart-pounding, for the Q&A. When the floor opened, I stood, legs trembling but voice steady. "I have something to share," I said, pulling out the letter. "I've been accepted into Stanford's AI program, fully funded. It's a big step for me, and I'd like your support to pursue it." The room went quiet. I looked at my father, expecting something. A nod, a glance, anything. Instead, he laughed, a sharp barking sound that echoed off the glass walls. "AI," he said, turning to the crowd like it was a punchline. "That's Ethan's territory. You're better off planning our next launch party." He stepped forward, snatched the letter from my hand, and tore it clean in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor like ash. "Women don't need degrees to support a family," he added, his tone final, like he'd settled a debate. The room erupted in awkward chuckles, a few heads turning away. Ethan smirked from his seat, adjusting his tie. I stood frozen, my face burning, every eye in that room await. My mother, Laura, was in the back, her lips pressed tight, eyes fixed on her coffee cup. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her silence hit harder than the sound of ripping paper. I wanted to scream, to grab those pieces and shove them in my father's face, but I didn't. I walked out, past the journalists, past the pastry trays, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Each step felt like a vow. I'd make them regret this. Back in my cubicle I sat, hands shaking, staring at the coffee machine's hum. The letter was gone, but its words, my acceptance, my worth, were carved in me. My father thought he'd silenced me, but he'd lit a fire. I wasn't just fighting for a degree, I was fighting for my place. Want to know what I did next? Stick with me, it's where things get real. Drop a comment. Has anyone ever tried to crush your dreams like that? I'm reading every one because we're in this together. Walking out of that meeting room, my father's laughter still ringing in my ears, I felt the weight of every eye in Quantum Labs pinning me down. The torn pieces of my Stanford letter lay scattered on the floor behind me, each one a reminder of his words. Women don't need degrees to support a family. My mother's silence, her refusal to meet my gaze, cut even deeper. I'd hoped for a shred of pride, a flicker of support, but all I got was the hum of the coffee machine in my cubicle and the bitter taste of being invisible. But something shifted in me that day. It wasn't just anger, it was clarity. My father thought he'd crushed me, but he'd only lit a fuse. I didn't go home right away. I sat at my desk, the 30-story tower of Quantum Labs looming around me, its glass walls reflecting the San Francisco skyline. The city was alive outside, all hustle and dreams, but in here I was just the girl who fixed bugs and planned parties. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. I was done waiting for permission to matter. I reached into my bag, half expecting to find nothing but lint and regret, but my fingers brushed against a small, hard object. I pulled it out, a battered USB drive, no bigger than a key fob, its silver casing scratched from years of neglect. It wasn't just any USB. It held something I'd almost forgotten. A project from my college days, an AI algorithm I'd poured my heart into. My mother, Laura, had slipped it to me on my 21st birthday, her voice barely a whisper. "Don't let them dim your light." Back then I tucked it away, too scared to show it to anyone. Now it felt like a lifeline. I drove to my Mission District apartment, the Bay Bridge glowing in the distance, its lights steady against the fog. My place was a shoebox, 500 square feet of creaky floors and second-hand furniture, but it was mine. I plugged the USB into my laptop, half expecting it to be corrupted. The screen lit up with folders, Project Spark, my old code, my notes, my dreams. It was an AI model for predictive analytics designed to optimize supply chains. I'd built it during late nights in my dorm, fueled by ramen and ambition. My professor had called it groundbreaking, but I'd never shown it to my father. Why bother? He'd already decided Ethan was the future. Reading through the code, I felt a spark reignite. This wasn't just a project, it was proof I belonged in tech, proof I could outthink the men who'd written me off. My mother's words echoed, "Don't let them dim your light." She'd seen something in me, even if she couldn't say it out loud. I thought of her at the meeting, her eyes glued to her coffee cup, and a pang hit me. Why couldn't she fight for me? But that USB, her quiet gift, was her way of believing in me, even if she didn't have the courage to show it. I closed my laptop and whispered to the empty room, "I'll shine brighter than they can handle." It wasn't a promise, it was a plan. The next morning, I walked into Quantum Labs with a new kind of focus. The launch was over, but the office still buzzed with post-event chaos. Ethan was holding court in the break room, regaling analysts with stories of his keynote genius. I slipped past, unnoticed, and sat at my corner desk. My inbox was flooded with tasks. Update the CRM, proofread Ethan's next pitch deck, order more toner. I did them all, but my mind was elsewhere. That USB had reminded me who I was. A coder. A thinker. Not just helpful. I started digging into Quantum Lab systems, not to sabotage but to understand. If I was going to fight for my place, I needed to know the battlefield. Late that night, alone in my apartment, I opened the USB again. I ran the old code, tweaking it to fit Quantum Lab's current supply chain data. It still worked, better than anything Ethan's team had churned out. I imagined pitching it to the board, seeing my father's face when he realized I wasn't just his daughter, but a force he couldn't ignore. But I knew he'd laugh again, or worse, hand it to Ethan to claim. I needed more than code, I needed a strategy. I thought back to my grandfather, Henry, who'd founded Quantum Labs 50 years ago. He'd been a tinkerer, a dreamer, the kind of man who'd sneak me circuit boards when I was 10 and tell me, "Build something nobody expects." He died when I was 15, but his story stuck with me. He'd always said the company was for those who earned it, not just those who shared his name. I wondered what he'd think of Ethan, strutting around with unearned titles, or my father dismissing half the world's talent. Henry's voice in my head felt like a nudge. Keep going. I didn't cry that night, though the weight of the day pressed hard. Instead, I mapped out my next steps. I'd start small, proving myself in the shadows. I'd rebuild Project Spark, integrate it into Quantum Lab systems, and show results nobody could ignore. If my father wouldn't give me a seat at the table, I'd build my own damn table. But I had to be careful. Ethan was watching, and my mother's silence meant I couldn't trust anyone, not yet. The city outside my window hummed, alive with possibility. San Francisco was supposed to be where dreams became code, where misfits like me could rewrite the rules. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to myself. That USB, that tiny piece of silver, was my first weapon. Want to know how I used it to shake Quantum Labs to its core? Stick with me, it's about to get wild. Drop a comment. What's something you've held on to that reminds you who you are? I'm reading every one, because we're building something together here. That night, clutching the old USB in my Mission District apartment, I felt a fire I hadn't known since college. The San Francisco skyline glittered outside, a reminder that this city was built on dreamers who refused to quit. My father's laughter, the torn Stanford letter, my mother's silence, they weren't just wounds anymore. They were fuel. The USB with its Project Spark code was my way back into the game. I wasn't just going to prove I belonged at Quantum Labs, I was going to make them see they couldn't function without me. But I had to play it smart. My brother Ethan was the golden boy, and my father Richard had the whole 30-story tower wrapped around his ego. One wrong move and I'd be out for good. I started small, slipping into Quantum Labs at 7 each morning, before the analysts in their pressed suits flooded the open plan office. My corner desk by the coffee machine was my war room, while I churned through the usual grunt work, updating CRMs, proofing Ethan's sloppy pitch decks. I quietly integrated Project Spark into the company's supply chain system. The algorithm was a beast, predicting bottlenecks and cutting costs with surgical precision. I ran tests in the background using dummy data to avoid detection. By week 3, my code was saving the company thousands daily, but I didn't tell a soul. Let them think it was their system humming along. I was playing the long game. Ethan, meanwhile, was basking in his post-launch glow. He'd taken credit for the product rollout, never mentioning the late nights I'd spent debugging his team's code. I'd catch him in the break room, tossing buzzwords like disruptive innovation to wide-eyed interns. One day, he dropped a stack of reports on my desk, smirking. "Fix these by noon, sis. You're good at cleaning up messes." I nodded, biting back the urge to shove his smug grin into the shredder. But as he walked away, I overheard him on a call, his voice low but clear. "Yeah, the supply chain's killing it. My tweaks are paying off." Tweaks? He hadn't touched a line of code in years. My blood boiled, but I kept my cool. That USB had taught me patience was a weapon. The real blow came at a team meeting, 6 weeks after the launch. The room was packed, 40 people, from coders to C-suite suits. Ethan stood at the front, clicking through a slide deck I'd built. "Our supply chain efficiency is up 20%. He bragged, gesturing to a graph that screamed my handiwork. "This is what happens when you trust my vision." The room clapped, my father beaming from the head of the table. I sat in the back, my fingers tight around a pen, waiting for someone to call it out. Nobody did. Not even Sarah, the data engineer who'd seen me tweaking the system late one night. My father raised his glass. "To Ethan, our future." The toast felt like a punch. I left the meeting, my chest tight, and headed to the server room, the only place in Quantum Labs where I could breathe. The hum of machines drowned out the applause still echoing in my head. I pulled up Project Sparks logs, watching the numbers tick up, millions saved, all because of me. But Ethan's name was on the report, his face in the company Slack channel. I wanted to scream, to storm back in and tell them it was mine. Instead, I did something riskier. I dug deeper into the system, tracing Ethan's access logs. If he was stealing credit, what else was he hiding? That's when I found it. A hidden folder, buried in a subdirectory only admins could access. Inside were emails, dozens of them, between Ethan and a guy named Jake, an old frat buddy from Stanford. They weren't just chatting about golf. Jake was funneling consulting fees to an offshore account, tied to projects Ethan had greenlit. The numbers didn't add up. Hundreds of thousands siphoned from Quantum Labs' R&D budget. My heart raced. This wasn't just arrogance, it was theft. I copied the emails to a secure drive, my hands shaking. If I played this right, Ethan's crown would crumble, but I needed proof that stuck. I reached out to Sarah, the data engineer, who'd always been kind but cautious. We met at a dive bar in Soma, far from Quantum Labs' glass towers. Over greasy fries and cheap beer, I showed her the emails. Her eyes widened. "This could tank the company," she whispered. "You sure you want to go there?" I nodded. "They took my work, Sarah. I'm taking their lies." She hesitated, then pulled out her laptop, showing me how to cross-reference the transactions with vendor logs. By midnight, we had a paper trail, dates, amounts, even Jake's fake invoices. Back in my apartment, I stared at the secure drive, its weight heavier than the USB. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about justice. But I knew the cost. Exposing Ethan meant dragging my father's name through the mud. Maybe even my mother's. Laura's silence at the meeting still stung. Her refusal to stand up for me, a wound that wouldn't heal. Yet her words from years ago, "Don't let them dim your light," kept me going. I thought of my grandfather, Henry, who'd believed in earning your place. He'd hate what Quantum Labs had become. A boys' club built on stolen glory. I didn't sleep that night. The Bay Bridge lights flickered outside, steady as ever. I was walking a tightrope, one slip and I'd lose everything. But I wasn't the girl who'd stood frozen while her father tore her dreams apart. I was something sharper now, something they hadn't counted on. Want to know how I turned those emails into a reckoning? Stick with me, it's about to hit hard. Drop a comment. Have you ever caught someone stealing your thunder? I'm reading every one because we're not just telling a story, we're rewriting the rules. Holding that secure drive in my Mission District apartment, the weight of Ethan's betrayal felt heavier than the San Francisco fog outside. Those emails, proof he'd siphoned hundreds of thousands from Quantum Labs, weren't just a scandal. They were my leverage. My father's voice calling me a waste of time, and my mother's silence at that humiliating meeting still burned, But I wasn't the girl who'd stood frozen while her Stanford letter was torn to shreds. I'd found Project Spark on that old USB, rekindled my fire, and now I had evidence that could topple Ethan's throne. But I needed more than emails to win this war. I needed a knockout punch, something my father, Richard, couldn't ignore. I kept my routine airtight, showing up at Quantum Lab's 30-story tower by 7 each morning. My corner desk, wedged by the coffee machine, was my cover. I nodded through Ethan's orders, fixed this spreadsheet, proofed that deck, while secretly refining Project Spark's integration. The algorithm was now saving the company millions, but Ethan still took credit, strutting through the open plan office like he'd coded it himself. I let him. Every smug grin fueled my resolve. Sarah, the data engineer who'd helped me trace Ethan's fake invoices, became my quiet ally. We'd exchange glances in the server room, her nod saying she had my back. But trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Not with my mother's betrayal still raw. The breakthrough came by accident 3 weeks after I found the emails. I was digging through old company records, cross-checking vendor logs for Sarah's paper trail, when I stumbled on a locked file in the archives. It was buried deep, encrypted with a protocol only execs used. I shouldn't have had access, but my grandfather Henry had slipped me his admin key years ago, back when he'd sneak me circuit boards and whisper, "Build something nobody expects." I used it now, heart-pounding, and cracked the file open. Inside was a bombshell, a notarized document from Henry's will, dated 2 months before his death. It named me as the holder of a 25% stake in Quantum Labs, a silent share never activated. My father had buried it, likely thinking I'd never find out. Henry's note was attached, his scrawl unmistakable. "For Emma when she's ready to fight." I sat back breathless. This wasn't just leverage, it was power. 25% meant I could sway board votes, challenge Ethan's reign. But the document also stung. My mother, Laura, was listed as a witness. She'd known about my stake and said nothing, choosing Ethan's path over mine. Her whispered words from years ago, "Don't let them dim your light," felt hollow now, a half-hearted gift overshadowed by her silence. I printed the document, tucked it into a fireproof envelope, and hid it in my apartment, under a loose floorboard. I wasn't ready to play that card yet. Timing was everything. The chance came at Quantum Lab's annual gala, held at a swanky rooftop venue in Soma, 10 blocks from the tower. The city sparkled below, a sea of light stretching to the Bay Bridge. I wore a simple black dress, blending into the crowd of suits and sequins. Ethan was the star, clinking champagne flutes with investors, his laugh loud enough to drown out the jazz band. My father took the stage, his voice booming. "Ethan's our future, leading us to new heights as CEO." The crowd roared, but my eyes were on my mother, standing by a potted palm, her smile tight. I approached, the envelope heavy in my clutch. "Mom," I said quietly, "we need to talk." She flinched, her eyes darting to Ethan. "Not now," she murmured, adjusting her pearls. I stepped closer. "I found Grandpa's will. I know about the 25%. Her face paled, but she recovered fast, pulling me to a corner. "Don't ruin this for Ethan," she pleaded, her voice low. "He needs this more than you." "Needs?" The word hit like a slap. "You knew," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "You let Dad erase me, and you helped." She looked away, her hands trembling. "I thought it was best for the family," she whispered. I stared at her, the woman who'd given me that USB, who'd once believed in me. "You chose wrong," I said, and walked away, her silence louder than the gala's hum. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on the floor, the envelope in my lap. The Bay Bridge glowed outside, steady as ever. My mother's betrayal hurt worse than my father's scorn, but it clarified things. I wasn't fighting for their approval anymore. I was fighting for my place. Henry's words echoed. "When she's ready to fight." I was ready. The 25% stake was my ace, but I needed to wield it carefully. Ethan's emails, Sarah's paper trail, and now this document, they were a trifecta. I could go to the board, expose Ethan's theft, and claim my share. But that would mean war, not just with Ethan but with my father, maybe the whole company. I thought of Henry building Quantum Labs from a garage in Palo Alto 50 years ago. He'd seen something in me, even as a kid, wiring circuits at his kitchen table. He'd hate the nepotism, the lies, the way my father had turned his dream into a boys' club. I owed it to him and to myself to fix this. But I needed one more piece, something to tie Ethan's fraud to the company's core. Sarah had mentioned a restricted ledger, one only execs could access. If I could crack it, I'd have everything. I didn't sleep that night, mapping my next move. The gala had shown me the stakes. Ethan's crown, my mother's complicity, my father's blindness. I wasn't just a coder anymore. I was a threat they hadn't seen coming. Want to know how I used that 25% to shake their world? Stick with me, it's about to get intense. Drop a comment. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted? I'm reading every one because this fight's for all of us. After walking away from my mother at the Quantum Labs gala, her plea to not ruin this for Ethan echoing like a betrayal, I felt a shift. The San Francisco skyline glittered beyond the rooftop venue. But the Bay Bridge's steady glow couldn't calm the storm inside me. My father's scorn, my mother's complicity, and Ethan's theft of my work. They weren't just personal slights. They were a system I had to dismantle. The 25% stake from my grandfather Henry's will, hidden in my apartment's fireproof envelope, was my trump card. Paired with the emails proving Ethan's fraud, hundreds of thousands siphoned to his frat buddy Jake. It was enough to shake Quantum Labs' 30-story tower. But I needed one final piece to make it airtight. The restricted ledger Sarah had mentioned, the company's financial backbone. If I could crack it, I'd have Ethan dead to rights. I kept my head down at Quantum Labs, slipping into the open plan office at 7 each morning. My corner desk by the coffee machine was my camouflage, buried under busy work, scheduling meetings, debugging code Ethan's team botched. Project Spark, my AI algorithm, was still running silently, saving millions while Ethan took the credit. I let him, knowing every stolen accolade tightened the noose. Sarah, my data engineer ally, was my lifeline. We'd meet in the server room, her quick nods signaling she was still in. The ledger's locked behind exec credentials, she'd whispered one night, handing me a sticky note with a partial key. Be careful. They're watching. I used Henry's old admin access, the one he'd given me as a kid, to probe the system. Late nights in my Mission District apartment, the Bay Bridge lights my only company, I chipped away at the ledger's encryption. By week 4 I broke through. The files were a goldmine. Transaction logs showing Ethan's consulting fees weren't just sloppy, they were deliberate. Over $2 million had been funneled through Jake's offshore account, tied to fake vendors for projects that never existed. The ledger also showed my father's digital signature on several approvals, though I doubted he knew the details. Ethan had played him too. I backed everything up on a secure drive, cross-referencing with Sarah's vendor logs. My hands shook as I saved the final file. This wasn't just evidence, it was a guillotine. I needed to move fast but carefully. Ethan was paranoid, checking server logs after I'd accessed the ledger. One morning, he leaned over my desk, his cologne sharp. "You're spending a lot of time in the system," he said, eyes narrow. "Don't get any ideas." I smiled, heart racing. "Just doing my job." He walked away, but I knew my time was short. Sarah and I met at our Soma dive bar, the neon sign flickering outside. Over warm beer, she scanned my printouts. "This'll bring down more than Ethan," she said, voice low. "Your dad, the board, they'll all take heat." I nodded. "They built this mess. Let it burn." She slid me a USB with her final logs, her fingers brushing mine. "You're braver than I'd be," she said. I didn't feel brave, just done being invisible. The plan took shape in my apartment, the fireproof envelope with Henry's will beside my laptop. I'd go to the board, but not yet. I needed to test the waters, see who'd back me. I reached out to Carla, a senior analyst who'd once called my code elegant during a review. We met at a coffee shop in the Embarcadero, the ferry horns cutting through the fog. I showed her a single ledger entry, no names attached. Her eyes widened. "This is fraud, plain and simple. Who's behind it?" I stayed quiet, gauging her. "If I bring this forward, will you vouch for my work?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Your algorithm's carrying us. You've earned a voice." It wasn't loyalty, but it was enough. Back at Quantum Labs, tension was rising. Ethan's team was prepping for a new pitch, leaning hard on Project Spark's results. I overheard him in a meeting claiming he'd optimized the system. My father clapped him on the back, oblivious. I kept working, but every task felt like a countdown. One night, digging through old emails, I found a message from my mother to my father sent years ago. Emma's got Henry's spark. Don't push her out. He'd replied. She'll be fine supporting Ethan. Supporting. The word twisted like a knife. Laura had seen my potential but buried it to keep the peace. Her betrayal wasn't just silence, it was a choice. I started preparing my case, organizing the ledger, emails, and Henry's will into a dossier. I practiced my pitch in my apartment, pacing past my thrift store couch. I'm not here to beg, I'd say to the board. I'm here to show you what you've ignored. But doubt crept in. Exposing Ethan meant torching my family's legacy, maybe Quantum Labs itself. Henry had built this company from a Palo Alto garage 50 years ago, on grit and ingenuity. Would he want me to tear it down? I thought of his stories, his belief in earning your place. This wasn't destruction, it was justice. One evening, Sarah texted. Ethan's sniffing around the ledger. Move now or we're screwed. My pulse spiked. I printed the dossier, slipped it into a locked briefcase, and hid the secure drive under my floorboard. The Bay Bridge glowed outside, a steady reminder that San Francisco rewarded those who fought. I wasn't just fighting for me, I was fighting for every woman told she didn't belong. My mother's face flashed in my mind, her trembling hands at the gala. I wanted to hate her, but part of me still hoped she'd see me, really see me when I brought this to light. The clock was ticking. Ethan's pitch was in 2 days, a perfect stage for my move. I wasn't ready to show Henry's will yet. That was my final card. First, I'd use the ledger to expose Ethan's fraud, then let the board decide his fate. Want to know how I turned their lies into my victory? Stick with me, it's about to explode. Drop a comment. Have you ever had to risk everything to prove yourself? I'm reading every one because this isn't just my story. It's ours. The warning from Sarah. Ethan sniffing around the ledger lit a fire under me. I could feel the clock ticking in my Mission District apartment, the Bay Bridge lights steady outside, reminding me San Francisco was a city of fighters. My dossier locked in a briefcase held everything. The restricted ledger showing Ethan's $2 million fraud, emails to his frat buddy Jake, and my grandfather Henry's will granting me a 25% stake in Quantum Labs. My father's scorn, my mother's betrayal at the gala, and Ethan's theft of my Project Spark algorithm, they'd all led to this. I wasn't just the girl by the coffee machine anymore. I was a storm, and Ethan's big pitch in 2 days was my chance to strike. I spent the next 48 hours in a blur double-checking every file. At Quantum Labs I kept my routine, 7 in the morning, nodding through Ethan's orders, debugging code while my heart raced. Sarah slipped me a final vendor log in the server room, her eyes sharp. He's spooked, she whispered. Checked the admin logs yesterday. I nodded, slipping the USB into my pocket. Ethan's paranoia was my edge. He knew something was off but couldn't pin it on me. Yet, I avoided his gaze in the open plan office, his tailored blazer a stark contrast to my thrift store cardigan. Let him underestimate me. It was his last mistake. The pitch was in Quantum Lab's 30th floor boardroom, a glass-walled space overlooking the city. 50 suits packed the room. Board members, investors, tech journalists, buzzing with anticipation. Ethan stood at the front, his slide deck flashing Project Spark's numbers. 20% efficiency gains, millions saved. My numbers. My code. My father, Richard, sat at the head, beaming like Ethan was his legacy carved in gold. My mother, Laura, was in the back, her pearls gleaming, her smile tight. I sat near the door, my briefcase at my feet, the dossier inside heavy as a grenade. I'd planned to wait for the Q&A, but Ethan's opening line changed everything. This algorithm, he said, gesturing to my work, is my vision for Quantum Lab's future. The room clapped, but my blood boiled. My father nodded, proud. I couldn't wait. I stood, my voice cutting through the hum. That's my algorithm, I said, loud but steady. The room froze. Ethan's grin faltered. I built Project Spark. Every line of code, every optimization. It's mine. Whispers rippled. My father's face darkened. Sit down, he barked. This isn't the place. But I didn't budge. I opened my briefcase, pulling out the dossier. It's exactly the place, I said, sliding the ledger printouts across the table. While Ethan's been claiming my work, he's also been stealing from the company. The boardroom erupted, gasps, murmurs, chairs shifting. Ethan laughed, nervous. She's delusional, he said, but his eyes darted to the papers. I kept going, my voice calm but razor sharp. $2 million, funneled to an offshore account through fake vendors. Here's the proof: emails, transaction logs, vendor invoices. All tied to Ethan and his friend Jake. I tapped the stack. And your signature, Dad, on approvals you didn't read. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The board members flipped through the pages, their faces grim. Sarah in the back gave me a small nod. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "This is a setup," he shouted. "You're trying to destroy our family." His voice cracked, betraying him. I didn't flinch. "You destroyed it," I said. "When you stole from the company and erased my work." I turned to the board. "I'm invoking my 25% stake in Quantum Labs, per Henry Coleman's will, to call for an immediate vote to suspend Ethan pending a full investigation." The room went dead silent. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her pearls. My father stood, his face red. "You have no stake," he growled. I slid Henry's will across the table. "Read it," I said. Grandpa gave me a voice. "You buried it." The board's chair, a gray-haired woman named Helen, took the will, her eyes scanning the notarized page. She looked at me, then my father. "This is binding," she said, voice firm. "We'll vote." Ethan lunged forward. "You can't do this. She's nobody." But Helen raised a hand. "Sit down, Ethan." The vote was swift. 8 in favor, 2 abstained, none opposed. Ethan's face drained of color. He shoved his chair back, storming out, the glass door rattling behind him. My father sank into his seat, silent for once. The boardroom felt different now, the air charged but clean. I turned to my mother, still frozen by the palm. Her eyes met mine, wet with something: regret, fear, I couldn't tell. "You tried to protect Ethan," I said, not loud but clear. "You should have protected me." She opened her mouth, but no words came. She looked small, her pearls no shield against the truth. I didn't wait for her to answer. I'd spent years chasing her approval, but I didn't need it anymore. I claimed my place. Helen approached as the room cleared. "You've got guts," she said, handing back the will. "What now?" I took a breath. "I want an audit, full transparency. And I want my work credited." She nodded. "Done." I left the boardroom, my heels steady on the marble floor. Past the journalists scribbling notes. Past the interns whispering. The Bay Bridge would be glowing outside, but I didn't need its light. I was my own. This wasn't the end. Ethan's fallout was coming, and my father's reckoning loomed. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I'd exposed their lies, claimed my stake, and rewritten their rules. Want to know how I turned Quantum Labs into something better? Stick with me, it's about to inspire. Drop a comment. Have you ever stood up to someone who underestimated you? I'm reading every one, because we're rewriting legacies together. Walking out of that boardroom, the weight of my victory over Ethan felt like a new dawn. I'd exposed his $2 million fraud, claimed my 25% stake in Quantum Labs, and silenced my father's scorn with Henry's will. My mother's trembling silence lingered, but I was done chasing her approval. San Francisco's Bay Bridge glowed outside, a beacon of possibility. I wasn't just reclaiming my place, I was rebuilding Quantum Labs into something better, something my grandfather would have been proud of. The next week, I launched Spark Fund, a division to back women-led tech startups. From my new office on the 30th floor, I hired Sarah, the data engineer who'd stood by me, and 2 coders from overlooked Bay Area towns. We scouted talent in places like Oakland and Richmond, where dreams often got buried under bills. Spark Fund's first grant went to a 20-year-old single mom building an AI app for affordable childcare. By month's end, we had 50 applications, each one a reminder that talent didn't need a pedigree, just a chance. I walked through Quantum Lab's open plan office, no longer the girl by the coffee machine. My name was on the door, my code in the system, my vision on the walls. I changed the culture too. No more boys' club pitches or stolen credit. I mandated transparent project logs, ensuring every coder's work was traced. The board, shaken by Ethan's fallout, backed me. My father stayed silent, his office dark most days. My mother called once, her voice soft, but I let it go to voicemail. Spark Fund wasn't just a fund. It was my answer to every "women don't belong" I'd ever heard. I was building a legacy not just for me, but for every woman told to stay small. Want to see how I sealed this new future? Stick with me, it's pure inspiration. Drop a comment. What's a dream you're fighting for? I'm reading every one, because we're sparking change together. Launching SparkFund was like flipping the script on Quantum Labs Boys Club. From my 30th floor office, I watched San Francisco's Bay Bridge glow. A reminder that I'd turned my father's scorn and Ethan's betrayal into a platform for women in tech. My mother's silence and my father's absence still lingered, but SparkFund's 50-plus applications, from coders in Oakland to dreamers in Richmond, proved I was building something bigger than their doubts. My grandfather Henry's 25% stake had given me power, but SparkFund gave me purpose. One quiet evening, I sat at my desk, the city humming below, and wrote a letter to myself. They said you didn't belong, I typed. But you proved your worth isn't theirs to define. Every word felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for years. I listed the women I'd fought beside: Sarah, the single mom with the AI app, the coders who'd been told to stay small. Never let anyone dim your light, I wrote. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. That letter wasn't just for me. It was for every woman who'd been underestimated. I locked it in my drawer, not to hide but to rest. My lesson: your value isn't tied to someone else's approval. Fight for your place, even when the room feels stacked against you. Quantum Labs wasn't perfect, but with SparkFund I was rewriting its legacy one grant at a time. My father's words, "Women don't belong in tech," were just noise now. I'd built my own table, and it was crowded with dreamers who belonged. What's your story? Have you ever fought to be seen? Drop it in the comments, I'm reading every one. Subscribe for more, because we're not just coding apps, we're coding change. Share this if it hit home, and let's keep rewriting the rules together.